Hello, my name is Brennan Young and welcome back to my YouTube channel. You're probably thinking, how much time do you have on your hands? What do you do day to day? And I'd love to tell you about it. Right now I'm unemployed, so that means I don't have a job. I actually was fired in December. So I've just been trying to fill up my time as best I could, but I wanted to talk about my first experience out of college, my first job out of college, and what it looked like, and ultimately how I got let go, aka fired. But if you ask me about it, I will let you know that I was let go or that I left in December, but the truth is they fired me 5 days before Christmas. So let's talk about it. I got this job in May of 2023. So I graduated from Grand Canyon University in April of 2023, and I was kind of late to the game when it came to applying for jobs. I probably started around mid-March, and I was worried. I was like, man, what am I going to do? I got my degree in communications with broadcasting and new media, hoping to do something social media related, but honestly, when it came down to it, I was just going to take anything that I could get. So the first job that I actually interviewed is the one that I got. So when it came down to it, there was a friend who previously worked there and she recommended it to me, and I was like, awesome, I'll give it a shot. So I applied for this, and then I researched all of the people who were going to be on the call. I looked up their roles, the position. I just wanted to know this field inside and out. So that's exactly what I did. And for the 3 people on there, I was like, oh, your LinkedIn says this, how long would you like to stay at the company? How much better is it than the last position that you had? And I killed it. I was supposed to hear back 7 to 10 days after the final interview, and they called me 2 hours later and offered me the job on the spot. It paid very well. It was $55,000, and that was great. I was like, oh my goodness, this is more than I could have asked for. And when I got there, I thought that it was more project management related because that's what they sold it as in the interview. And then I found out that it was recruiting sales. My job was to get people booked for a phone consultation. So that's what I had to do. I had to hit a quota each month. While it wasn't numbers based, it was kind of an unspoken of you better get this amount, and that was around 8. So starting out, I did pretty well. I would get 6 or 7. I was getting a feel for things, and while the team that I had, they were the slowest. I was doing well. I was doing as good as my colleague who was there for longer. Then they were doing a contest in October, and I ended up getting 2 concussions during that month. First time I got punched in Vegas, and then the second time I fell off of a fence. And I still had my strongest month yet. There was a compliance mistake that I made where it was nothing very serious, but it definitely woke me up a little bit and man, I'm working too fast, because that's what they stress is efficiency. You better have your workload, and then you better ask for more. That was the mindset. So that's what I'll try to do. I'll try to work as fast as I could, as hard as I could, and then I had to keep a smile on my face, and I'd ask for more. And this was one of those jobs where you felt the workload as you left. I was like, man, if I stayed an hour longer, then I probably would feel better tomorrow. I worked 8:45 a.m. to 6 p.m. and then it was 3 days in office, which was a lot, but it wasn't too bad. But most nights I was staying till about 7 p.m. and I would do that a couple times throughout the week. And yeah, it was pretty tiring. So back to the October contest, I probably placed 3rd out of 12 people, so I was very proud of myself. And then that compliance mistake, they were like, how did you let this happen? I brought somebody in who was an 11th month former when they're supposed to be 12 months removed, and that was just one of those things where I was like, oh my goodness, I'm sorry. That was around the time of my concussion. I was still working very, very hard, but that slipped my eye. So I just made a genuine mistake, and it was don't let that happen again. And I noticed they started to be up my butt after that, of just well, speed matters, ultimately what matters is how detail oriented you are, which I completely agree. But I would talk to my boss. I put in an extra 2 hours that night, and that wasn't acknowledged. What was acknowledged was just my mistake, and I was I was just trying to work harder and faster and smarter than everybody else, and something slipped my eye. But that wasn't enough. So they still started to get on my case. After the October, it was okay, now do better. Now hit 10 or 12. And I was like, goodness, that took me a lot, especially with those 2 concussions and being out for a week. So they started to watch all of the projects that I was on. They would just be like, okay, and this is how you do it. As if I was being trained the first week. They scrapped the whole fast, efficient thing to just be detail oriented and take less projects. And I was like, all right, like if that's what you suggest. So I started to kind of change my ways and divert to doing a new method, which did take getting used to, especially with like people breathing over my back. But I took their advice. I knew that I didn't want to be at this company very long just because of how stressful and demanding it was, but I still wanted to give my best effort. November and December were known as the slowest months, which I trusted. They're like, don't worry, like we're gonna reevaluate you and the other teams in February, because January is like the ultimate test to like really see how you're doing once things start picking up. If we want you to move up, we want to evaluate that in February. And I was like, okay, all right, I'll slow down my process. I involved them in it, asked questions, and I did things their way. And then in December, I used a sick day because it was about to expire and I wasn't feeling too hot, and it was very, very slow. Like the last week was just like, you had to just like, I was watching my like trainings and tutorials, like that's what they suggested that we do with their time, and I was like, oh man, I don't want to waste another day, I'll just use my sick day since I'm not feeling well. And then I noticed the next day they had like scheduled a meeting, and I was like, that seems like sketchy, because I've already had like my end of year review and I've already had like meetings with my bosses. I was like, that doesn't feel right. And then they pushed it back a few hours later, and then we got on the call, and it was an HR lady there, so I already knew my fate, and he said that we can't keep you because of like the continual mistakes, which was a bit odd to me, because in previous meetings he said that his favorite thing about me is how self-aware I was, and I knew how to improve, and I always ended up doing it, and I could credit myself for that. I worked hard and they saw me doing it. They never saw me like sitting on my phone being lazy. Like I really did like put my focus into the job. I just wasn't a powerhouse when it comes to sales like what they wanted in their other employees. So I didn't even argue. I just said, okay. He asked if I had any questions. I said no. But looking back on it, I wish rather than firing me that they would trust me. Like when I started doing their process the last week before I got fired, I brought in 10 people and my other coworker only brought in one, but that one person got booked. The 10 people that I brought in didn't get booked, but I was still doing my job well and I was still being efficient, just not as large as they wanted. So that was quite disappointing, and it definitely has burnt me out quite a bit. When I think about starting a new job, I'm like, man, I don't want to go into the corporate world. Like my first setting did not go the way that I planned. Is every company going to be like this? Am I going to feel stressed out leaving work every single day? So that's just a big fear when it comes to going back to work, and I definitely want to avoid the corporate world as much as possible, specifically recruiting and sales. Not every job that you get right out of college is going to work out. That is what everybody has told me. Everybody gets a crappy job and you just have to figure out what you want. And I frankly don't know what I want, but I know I want to be somewhere, and right now that's not the corporate world. So I'm going to be dodging that as much as possible.